After studying this module, you shall be able to know, firstly, the science of fingerprinting originated in India. Secondly, fingerprints are the most infallible means of identification. And finally, that the world's first fingerprint bureau was established in India. Introduction. Whether one believes in the theological origin of man or goes with the anthropological school of thought, there can be no doubt that each person is individualized by his or her fingerprints. Today, fingerprint individuality is accepted and taken for granted all over the world. But only when we go back into the history of this discipline do we realize that Indians knew about the relevance and significance of fingerprinting before any other civilization had an inkling of it. Since the dawn of recorded history till the present times, Indians have consistently studied and researched this branch of knowledge, traversing from initial speculation through interpretation to its development into the most perfect system of identification.
Since ancient times, fingerprinting has remained intertwined with Indian culture. An Indian scripture, Samudra Shastra, compiled by a sage named Samudra Rishi in 3102 BC, tells us a great deal about fingerprinting. Modern fingerprint examiners broadly classify fingerprint patterns in three broad types: arches, loops, and whorls. It has also been noted that statistically 5% of fingerprints have arch pattern, 60% are loops, and 35% are whorls. Samudra Shastra too identifies three types of fingerprints. It says that two are of common types: Shankha, corresponding to loops, and Chakra, corresponding to whorls, while the third type, Seep, corresponding to arches, are rare. It is not surprising that the fingerprint examiners of modern era and Samudra Rishi of ancient era reached the same conclusions. The astonishing fact is that what the experts inferred merely 100 years ago, the holy man could ratiocinate more than 5,000 years ago. There is no written record on description of fingerprints prior to Samudra Shastra. The modern science of fingerprinting asserts that parallel ridges on fingertips are interrupted by seven common types of irregularities known as fingerprint characters or minutiae. A. Ridge termination, when the ridge flow abruptly ends. B. Bifurcation, when the ridge splits into two making a Y. C. Lake, when there is an enclosed area in between the ridge. D. Island, when there is a small dot or circle within the overall pattern. E. Short independent ridge, when there is a relatively small ridge within the overall pattern. F. Hook or spur, when a small curved ridge is attached to a regular ridge. G. Crossover, when two parallel ridges are joined by a small ridge. Apuranjava, Puranjava, Padam, and arcs are concurrent to bifurcation, lake, hook, and island respectively of modern fingerprinting discipline. Nirpaks and Kundla are close to island, while Kamal is close to lake. Toran appears similar to crossover. The fact that the portrayal of fingerprint characters in Samudra Shastra is far less tangible than what it is now, reflects the limitations of technology when the scripture was written. It is relatively easy to discern the outer pattern of a fingerprint with naked eye. But for locating the minutiae, one has to use a magnifying glass. The first lens was invented around 1 AD. How could Samudra Rishi and his disciples decipher the rich characters, some with perfection and others with blemish, without the aid of a magnifier is still a mystery. Nevertheless, it is obvious that the author of Samudra Shastra would not have studied such minor details directly from the fingers. This means that he must have developed a method to record the finger impressions on a suitable surface. This also means that he would have designed a version of modern day stamp pad. It need to be emphasized that Samudra Shastra contemplates the designs on fingers and hands from an astrological point of view. The scripture does not highlight the use of fingerprints for solving crime cases. Perhaps there was no crime in India during those good old days. Medieval era. However, in the medieval era, Indian became cognizant of the fact that the handprint of each person is unique. Several edicts and documents of this period bear the handprint of the author instead of or in addition to his seal signatures. For example, the hand impression of Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. This has been reproduced from a Farman royal edict addressed by the emperor to Dalan Singh, the king of Gidor in present day of Bihar. Concerning Mughal Farmans first, Hassan in his book The Central Structure of the Mughal Empire writes, three marks of distinction were established as a tradition by which the king, according to the rank of the addressee and the extent of favour desired to be bestowed upon him, could exalt him. First, by putting his signature in addition to the official seal. Second, by adding a line or two at the top in his own hand. Third, by putting the mark of the royal hand on the farman. The following two examples support Hassan's assertion. A. In 1636 AD, the joint forces of Shah Jahan and Adil Khan under the command of Khan Zaman Bahadur invaded the camp of Shahuji Bhosle, the ruler of Poona in the present-day Maharashtra. The joint army defeated Shahuji, who was compelled to accept the terms of peace. Badshah Nama, the biography of Shah Jahan, relates, since the garrison of Shahuji was now reduced to great extremities, Shahuji wrote frequently to Khan Bahadur in the most humble strain, promising to pay allegiance to the crown. He at the same time solicited a written treaty stamped with the impression of his hand. B. In 1613 AD, Mughal Emperor Jahangir defeated Amar Singh Sisodia, the ruler of Udaipur in present-day Rajasthan. The following is recorded in Tuzuki Jahangiri, the biography of Jahangir. When Rana Amar Singh Sisodia of Udaipur was brought under the yoke of obedience, he demanded the royal panja as a condition of treaty, and the condition was complied with. Rulers other than those belonging to the Mughal dynasty were also aware of the importance of handprints, fingerprints. We once again refer to the handprint bearing treaty which Shahuji Bhosle solicited from Shah Jahan. Normally, the victorious ruler dictates the conditions of the treaty. But here is a case where a king, who is at the receiving end, lays down the terms for peace. By asking for a hand printed document, Bhosle was trying to ensure that the covenant be respected by the descendants of the warring factions, clearly implying that the handprint was intended to be used as a mode of identification. Moreover, regarding Mughal farmers, first, Hassan in his book The Central Structure of the Mughal Empire writes, the procedure in drafting the farmans was very elaborate, having regard to the conditions of the age in which the Mughals ruled. Every necessary precaution was taken to safeguard against frauds in this connection. The fact that handprint was duly safeguarded clearly indicates its utility as a means of identification. Modern era 1897, the world's first fingerprint bureau was set up in Calcutta, now Kolkata. Christened Bengal Fingerprint Bureau, it was housed in Writers' Building. At that time, a very large section of Indian population was illiterate. Instead of appending their signatures on official documents, most persons used to impress their handprints. With passage of time, handprint gave way to impressions of index and ring fingers. About 2 years before the inauguration of the Bengal Fingerprint Bureau, the Deed Registration Office proposed a landmark amendment regarding fingerprint signatures. Khan Bahadur Dilawar Hossain Ahmed, Inspector General of Registration, in a note number 4655 dated October 12, 1895, addressed to the Chief Secretary, Government of Bengal, stated, originally the impression of the registrant's first, index, and third ring fingers were taken, but the thumb mark alone is most suitable for ready identification because a. its impression is much larger than that of the fingers and the pattern can be read easily without magnifying power, and b. the question would never arise as to which digit was actually used in making the impression if the thumb was used. By the time the Bengal Fingerprint Bureau was inaugurated, the thumb impression became an acceptable form of signature not only on registration deeds but on all official documents including bank accounts, pension records, and postal transactions. The impression of any other finger too served the purpose, but the thumb impression was preferred and is still preferred as it has a large pattern area as compared to other digits. For cataloguing criminal record, however, the impressions of all 10 fingers were required. Therefore, whenever a suspect was arrested, the impressions of all his 10 fingers were taken and preserved for record keeping in a special type of proforma called index card. It was at Bengal Fingerprint Bureau that the formula for classifying all 10 fingerprints of a person for record keeping was worked out. More than 100 years later, this method is still being followed in all civilized nations of the world. Later, a single fingerprint classification system as well as a telegraphic code for transmitting fingerprints only one impression at a time from one crime record office to another was also developed at the Bengal Fingerprint Bureau. The techniques for detecting fingerprints at crime scenes, the procedure for recording the fingerprints of arrested suspects, and the scheme for comparing the detected and recorded fingerprints too were standardized here. Fingerprints now superseded all previous methods of establishing identities of criminals. With passage of time, these also evolved as a means to prevent crime. Still later, fingerprints began to be used for personal identification for humanitarian reasons, such as in cases of amnesia, missing persons, or unknown deceased. In addition, they proved invaluable in identifying victims of arson, floods, and air crashes. Automated fingerprint identification systems. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, law enforcement agencies across the nation began adopting automated fingerprint identification systems AFIS to improve their efficiency and reduce the amount of time it took to identify or not exclude a given individual from a fingerprint or to conduct a background investigation. AFIS introduced an enormous improvement in the way local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies managed fingerprints and identified people. Before the use of AFIS, the fingerprint identification process involved numerous clerks and fingerprint examiners sifting through thousands of tediously classified and catalogued paper fingerprint cards, while dealing with delays and challenges caused by the realities of exchanging information with other agencies by mail, fax, or other means. With AFIS, fingerprint examiners use computer workstation to mark the features of a scanned fingerprint image, example, ridge endings, bifurcations, encode the resulting data in a machine readable format, and then search for similar fingerprints in an associate database of known fingerprints and records. AFIS searches are fast and they often allow examiners to search across a larger pool of candidates. Although challenging cases can be time consuming depending on the size of the database being searched and the system's workload, AFIS often can return results to the examiner within minutes. Automated fingerprint identification is the process of automatically matching one or many unknown fingerprints against a database of known and unknown prints. Automated fingerprint identification systems are primarily used by law enforcement agencies for criminal identification initiatives, the most important of which include identifying a person suspected of committing a crime or linking a suspect to other unsolved crimes. Automated fingerprint verification is a closely related technique used in applications such as attendance and access control system. On a technical level, verification systems verify a claimed identity. A user might claim to be John by presenting his PIN or ID card, and verify his identity using his fingerprint, whereas identification systems determine identity based solely on fingerprints. With greater frequency in recent years, automated fingerprint identification systems have been used in large scale civil identification projects. The chief purpose of a civil fingerprint identification system is to prevent multiple enrollments in an electoral, welfare, driver licensing, or similar system. Another benefit of a civil fingerprint identification system is its use in background checks for job applicants for highly sensitive posts and educational personnel who have close contact with children.
We now come to summary. India was the first country to realize that each person can be individualized by means of fingerprints. It is therefore not surprising that the oldest official documents bearing fingerprints and handprints are found in India. It was here that the world's first fingerprint bureau was established. It was here that the formula for classifying fingerprints was invented. And it's a matter of pride for every Indian that more than 100 years later, the classification system is still being used all over the world. It was here that the telegraphic code for and single digit classification of fingerprints were first developed and put into practice. This is not the conclusion of this particular model. We have to go further, and in future models we will tell you that it were the Indians who devised a fingerprint classification system. This system is named as the Henry's method of fingerprint classification. The purpose of this system is that if a person commits a crime at one place and then goes to another city to commit crime, his fingerprints can still be matched because they can be catalogued in a particular mathematical manner. This manner in which the fingerprints can be classified, as I said, is named as Henry's method of fingerprint classification. Henry, or to be more precise, Sir Edward Richard Henry, was Inspector General of Police in Bengal. He had two subordinates, Azizul Haq and Hemchandra Bose. Both of them were sub-inspectors. It is alleged, and the archive research also proves so, that the fingerprint classification system was actually devised by Haq and Bose. But since they were junior officers and since we were under English rule at that time, Henry took away the sheen and took away also the credit for this invention. There is sufficient proof to demonstrate that Haq and Bose were the actual inventors. We will talk about this in details because it was Bose who also devised the telegraphic system of transmitting the fingerprints from one bureau to another. Please appreciate, in those times there were no email or fax facilities, and therefore the fingerprints had to be transmitted telegraphically. It was not humanly possible to send all 10 fingerprints of a person. So Bose also devised a system of classification based on a single fingerprint impression. These things were unknown to Henry, and when the system was taken to him, he shrewdly gave his name. It is now high time that the colonial clouds have dispersed and we give credit to the original inventors, that is Azizul Haq and Hemchandra Bose. We are trying to propagate that the fingerprint classification system should be renamed. Rather than being called Henry's system of fingerprint classification, it should now be named as Henry, Haq and Bose system of fingerprint classification.